So I have been looking for a sci-fi space opera books for a while because I've been reading a lot of fantasy lately and I like fantasy, I love fantasy, but I really love a good space opera. And I haven't really read one since Fractal Noise, um, Fractal Verse, the Fractal Verse one. So when I was in England, I saw this book and I read the backside and I was like, seems pretty good. Not too long, so it isn't a huge task to take on. If it's not a good book, it still wouldn't take me too long. Now, Dauntless, The Lost Fleet Dauntless, written by Jack Campbell, which is a pseudonym that John G. Henry wrote under for whatever reason. It was originally published back in 2006. I think this is a 2006 version, or it might be, probably not. This is a 2011 version, so 12th edition. Talked about how popular this book is. Now, currently on Goodreads, it's just a nearly perfect 4 out of 5 with 33,000 ratings and almost 2,000 reviews, so that's actually not too bad. It's not that long of a book, and I just want to read the very first sentence from the top review from December 26, 2011, and it's by a author called Felicia. Hey, it's a space story with marines and no vagina plot lines. Great. Not that I mind, it's just great that that's like a thing. Like, it's not anything I ever thought about, but I guess it's there. Now, let's talk about the book. First, up 5 chapters, up to chapter 6. And I have never read a book where it starts with multiple pages of the Space Navy structure, the fleet structure, the name of every ship. Well, every ship that has a name. So, like, 4th Battlecruiser Division is consisted of Dauntless, Daring, the Terrible, and the Victorious. Like, this is a lot. I like it, but that's a lot. And this feels already from that like a military book and not just a science fiction book. And that is foreshadowing for something later, maybe. Now, for the story we get an interesting perspective. The story follows Captain Jack Geary, who has been frozen for 100 years, where 2 human factions have been fighting the same war. For him, it means he just has a week has passed since his time and current time, but everything has changed. It's been 100 years. And it's an interesting premise because Jack is as blind to the military rules as we are. In 100 years fighting the same war, a lot changes. And that means the story itself is a fish out of water story. And it's kind of great, because the first section is just set up and it's super interesting. Now, Captain Jack wasn't expecting to have to do anything because he needs to rest. 100 years a cryo sleep, of course you need to rest. But the commander of the fleet is killed trying to negotiate an escape, and then Captain Jack is then tasked with leading the fleet. And here we see the first major problem of the fleet. Everything is run democratically, which, while great for civil service, is way too slow for military action. But the captains are all young and inexperienced, and this leads to some great frustrating moments. The fleet is minutes away from being killed, and they want to hold a meeting to discuss the options for them to bring back and then meet again to decide. It's wonderfully infuriating to read when you know they don't have time, and there's a reason why militaries do not work like that. Like that, there's a reason why all this discussion back and forth that happens before the mission and during the mission, it's the one in charge who makes all the decisions. End of discussion. I really love that Captain Jack. I really love him because of all his struggles with the almost civilian military, the thin line that he has to walk as he tries to assert himself as the actual decision maker, maker while also preventing a mutiny, because if one ship decides to not follow orders, he technically can't stop them. And the story has great emphasis on speed and time, which, when working with relativistic speeds where time and gravity becomes irrelevant, the story works kind of funkily with that, because it works a lot in light speed, essentially taking the velocity vectors and calculating the magnitude of it. But because everything goes so fast, it is done in relativistic speeds of how close to the speed of light they're traveling. And I'm gonna talk more about it later, but it's super interesting to hear them keep going, oh, they are 7 light seconds away. So what we see right now is 7 seconds ago, because that's how long it took light to get to us. Like that's so weird when you're used to like borderlining instantaneous. Of course, when you look at the sun, it's 8 minutes behind what you're seeing contra what's actually happening, but we don't think of it like that. Here they have to actively keep that in mind when talking with each other. It's so weird, I love it. And something I really enjoy too is Captain Jack's way of thinking. The solution for how to get every ship away from the enemy and how to handle the enemies at the next place is amazing. The man knows what he's doing, but it's the way he's challenged by the ship commanders. As I said, it's a very civilian-esque in the way he makes decisions, and he's trying to push back against it. But he can't, so he's forced to demand while also negotiating, and he has to spend time explaining his full plans. Remember, this is a man who has been gone for 100 years. He's apparently a folk hero for what he did in a fight, so all of them are trying to emulate his insane wild stunt that barely worked and wasn't supposed to work in an ideal world. So this head-first mentality is what he's struggling with, because he knows that was not a good strategy and it was only this one time that it worked. Now, after the first jump, we get our first space naval fight. It was absolutely amazing to see him trying to handle the captains who only had one strategy: fly at the enemy and hope to kill them before they kill you. Captain Jack has actual strategy and formation training, so of course he knows what to do. At least better than everyone else. But they still fight him. There's still ships that don't listen to him, so he has to spend a lot of time mangling them around, trying to make sure that they're gonna do what he says. And he can't, like, technically he could just say, you're no longer the captain of this ship, I am demoting you and promoting this guy. But the problem with that is everyone is just gonna be like, hold on, no, that's tyranny, we won't follow that. It's really interesting. After the fight, the last thing in this section I want to talk about is the slippery slope to just becoming war criminals. As the war stretched out, the Alliance got more and more desperate to get any advantage, and that means war crimes. In this case, killing civilians and hostages and nuking planets and just being awful. And Captain Jack is staunchly against it. It makes the others realize how horrible it actually is. Well, some of them. There's still a few of them who just wants to murder every enemy, civilian or not. And this entire dichotomy of how the people see Captain Jack and how he actually is insane, because it's a recurring question is, how do they think of me given I am not who they thought I am? And how do you juggle that? Like, you have 100-year of reputation to fight just to prove that none of it was true. Glad it's not me. Now let's talk about the rest of the book, because the chapters are quite long. So chapter 6, just to put it into perspective, I like doing that because, sometimes it feels arbitrary when I switch around, and it kinda is. I try to go for when it feels like a story like splits up, like a main part of the story is over and we're now getting to the next section. But this was roughly half the book, so I think it's fine. Now, So for the rest of the book, I don't have too much to say, given the story is mainly preparation for the big battle against the enemy fleet, and then of course battle against the fleet. Firstly, we have the training arc, where Captain Jack is trying to teach the captains how to do formations and move. And what we get is absolutely amazing. The fight is happening in real time, well, the simulations. But due to the speeds and distances when Captain Jack sends out an order, it might take 2 or 3 minutes before he can see the fleet move. If a ship is 1 light minute away, the distant light travels in 1 minute, it will take Captain Jack 2 minutes to see if his orders are followed, because he needs to send it out. That takes a minute, assuming he did communication at the speed of light. And then for them to see, he needs to wait 1 minute to see them actually move. So that's back and forth, that's 2 minutes. And I fucking love that. It's so often, I feel like sci-fi books were with faster than light travel or close to light speed travels will just say, oh yeah, of course that means we can communicate in instant times. But Campbell is like, no, it's more interesting if humans haven't completely mastered faster than light travel. It makes it super interesting and fun. And this brings me back to the foreshadowing with it feels like a military book. Because from what I can tell, the author Jack Campbell, the actual guy, John G. Henry, is a former naval officer in the American Navy. So and you can really tell that the way orders are given out, because in the Navy, when you want your ships to move around, they don't do it instantly. They're not like soldiers running around the field. They're not airplanes that can just bang sharply and then they're nearly there already because everything is going like Mark 15 bajillion. He's used to ships going relatively slow compared to the other branches of government. And you can tell here that is the mentality he has, that in space it's gonna be the same thing. And we especially see it in the big fight. Now, let's move on. Something I really like too, and this brings back to the military background of the author, is the idea of direction in space. Cause as the co-president, I don't remember her name, but she was annoying as fuck, points out, space has no direction. So how can they use absolute directions like they do? Absolute meaning they seemingly don't have a reference point to work from. But they do have a reference point. The star. They align themselves with the star on a specific side of the spaceships. And if everyone understands and agrees, then the seemingly absolute direction commands become relative direction in commands. And I fucking think that's amazing and intuitively a genius way to make up, down, left, right. Because he goes, well, we have starboard and I think they call it backboard. I mean, I know that's not what it's called in real world, but it doesn't have the real world name. I don't remember what it's actually called. But basically they're gonna go, alright, so this thing is always on this side of the ship. If that's towards the star, then that's starport. Actually really smart. Kinda goofy, really smart. Now, when we get to the actual big fights, I firstly want to talk about the almost full chapter spent on waiting for the enemy to fly to them. Again, other science fiction stories wouldn't do it like that, but have the enemy show up right at the waiting fleet. But due to gravity, they can only get out of the faster than light travel mode on specific places, or else they'll be torn to shreds. So we get an entire chapter of the fleet having lined up information now, just waiting. And what I really like is the focus on when to relax and when not to. Given they know it will take hours for the enemy to come, they can spend the time relaxing, and Captain Jack makes sure the people on the ship sees him relax. But it's also a great big focus on why you shouldn't readjust your formation constantly. As Captain Jack says, if you keep readjusting your formation, the enemy will take notice. Also, it's better to be rested and ready for the fight, where you can react faster. And really it's interesting because I imagine that's kind of the same thing with a naval fleet in our time. Like you can keep maneuvering the individual ships around each other and all that, but really what you're going to do is just tire. You're going to waste resources, you're going to waste fuel, you're just going to make yourself seem more interesting. So really, I think a lot of this stuff, like the way the fights are gone, has been taken from actual naval mentality. At least that's how it feels for me as a guy who hasn't been in the military before. Now for the fight, it's super cool. We stay with Captain Jack, and all we see is what he sees on his screens. He, and therefore also us, are only able to see what is going on when the light from the battle reaches the sensors. That also means whenever he sends out an order, he has to anticipate everything, and it's so fucking interesting. I don't think I ever heard of any other book doing it like that. But it works so well. It didn't feel awkward to read. It felt natural, and I think that is a huge praise to Jack Campbell for being able to make a fight with delays work. It should have been boring. It was not. It's so good. Now, let's conclude a bit on this book here. Is the book worth it? Yes, it is. It's very much worth it. It's super fucking good. Holy shit, I think it is. So good. It's very fast paced at times. At other times it's very slow. Mainly fast paced. But that is attentive to the length of the book. If you had read stuff like... Oh, it's called The Neutrino Star. The book is... I'm currently looking up. Neutrino Star... Honestly, I can... Neutrino... Star... I guess it was not the Guard Complex? I'm just spending time doing this. Anyways, no? Huh. I don't remember. It'll be on the screen then, most likely, if I remember. But yeah, I mean... If you read stuff like the book I'm thinking of, I want to say it's Anderson, but it's not, and it's not Sanderson, because that's the wrong. Well, if you read Dune, let's take Dune for instance. The books are huge. They're so long. It's the first one. The second one is not. I know. So a lot of time is devolved into slowing down the pacing. Here, all that fat has been trimmed away. We get the most necessary. It is a highly efficient book, and I love it. I cannot wait to read more. I need to get the rest of this insanely long series. Well, technically, this seems to be the main, and I think all of these are side stories. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely gonna read more Jack Campbell. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, leave a like and comment. If you want more, subscribe. Have you read this book? Have you read books like it? Do you want to read it if you haven't read it? If you did read it, what did you think? Let me know. Let's have a discussion going, actually. I really want to discuss books. Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye.